So whether we like it or loathe it, we can safely say in the age of 2020, with social media everywhere, that there's probably never been a time where our photo has been quite so important. And being really honest with you, if you are sending messages out, which as I said, we're going to be getting to on our next section, your photos are quite possibly the first area of your profile that people are going to take a really good look at. So it's very important that we get your photos to represent who you are and do a good job of communicating that. And this doesn't mean kind of suddenly turning into a supermodel overnight, but it does mean understanding what makes a better online dating photo and how you can improve your current photo selection. So just like the previous section, I have 5 key areas which I'm going to be looking at, which are sort of obvious things that sometimes people could improve. And then with each one, I've also got a little bit of a hint or an action step that you can take. So now if you are following with your profile at home, you can now take a look at the photos on there. So the first point that I'm going to make, to start again with a relatively obvious one, I hope, is that we don't want to have too many or too few photos on your profile. Too few, I would say, is 1 or 2 photos, or photos that use the same picture but from maybe different angles, or show you in the same outfit, or clearly taken on the same day. Now, the impression that will give by accident is that that is the only good photo of you in the known universe. And perhaps you feel like, well, Hayley, that is actually my only good photo because I just don't like photos being taken of me. And I can really understand that. But I think what's important is when you're putting together an online dating profile, you really want it to communicate trustworthiness. And unfortunately, if you have a too limited photo selection, that's actually going to ding your trustworthiness value. So we really want to make sure that you've got enough photos going on in there. That being said, things can go too far in the other direction though, and you can also not get it quite right by having too many photos. So remember, I would say probably 3 to 6 photos is about optimum. Beyond that, what can happen is you can find that whilst one photo will attract someone, another photo will put somebody off. So you can end up not capturing someone's attention fully. It also can be kind of confusing if they see lots of different aspects of your life. Now, whilst it's obviously good to show that you've got hobbies, interests, work, multiple things that you're into, we really want to have a really consolidated profile that puts across a really clear sort of brand image of who you are. This is one of our key ways that we're going to start to help you to use your profile to also attract the right people to you. So I want you to think, are you presenting yourself here as like the sporty guy, the professional woman, the yoga guru? I want you to think about what is the main thing that we're trying to communicate and get some really good consistency going on there in your photos. So the action step I'd love you to take is just to do a bit of a photo edit. That could mean that you remove any photos that you're a little bit unsure about and keep your photo set a little bit neater. Or it could mean if you're lacking a few photos, you're going to have to go out there and get some more. And I'm going to be giving some tips on that in just a second. So the second tip that I want to give you tonight is to be cautious as well of not having photos where you are too obscured. Again, this really goes back to that trust factor and that likability thing that we want to be coming through your photos. And as I said, this really is not about being a supermodel. This is about communicating the right values using photographs. So when we talk about being obscured, if photos of you are taken like a funny angle, or it's very dark, the photo is grainy, you've got a photo and you're one and there's like 10 friends with you, or you're wearing dark sunglasses or big hats or sombreros, or there's a picture of you, but you're like, where's Wally in the frame? That is always you become obscured. And okay, it's all right to have maybe 1 or 2 photos on your profile where you're not super clear with sunglasses on or hurtling down a ski slope. But you do want most of your photos for you to be really clear and visible, because remember, we also want people to be attracted to who you specifically are. And remember, a real core of building a successful relationship is, of course, acceptance. So if you're feeling like, oh, Hayley, I'm not sure about showing certain aspects of myself, remember, there really is someone out there for everyone, and people will be attracted to you authentically how you are. But in order to give them that opportunity, we have to be able to show you really clearly in your photos. So step 3 is a little bit along the same point, which is about not using photos that are too old. And I'm not talking just about the online dating horror stories here of someone turning up for a date and actually being 20 years older than they said on their profile. I'm not talking necessarily about that. But when we look at photos that are older, because our smartphones and our cameras are just getting so good at such a rapid rate, the photo quality we can take now versus 5 or 10 years ago is just so much better. So if you look at an old photo versus a new photo, you'll notice that in the new photo, it looks a lot crisper. The colors kind of like pop out more. You'll notice older photos look a bit sort of grainier and they're not as clear. So if we want to have photos that really, again, do that great job of capturing attention, we really want to use contemporary photos of you. So my action step for this is to get some new photos if you're lacking in that area. And I can understand what you're saying. You're like, Hayley, getting a photo taken of myself is possibly my least favorite thing to do. And I hear you on that. However, I think really, I'm going to sell this to you. It might be half a day on a Saturday, and you can suddenly potentially transform your online dating presence. So some simple little tips that you can do to enhance your photo selection. You want to take photos in natural light is really, really good. So facing a nice window or being outside during the daytime. In fact, for those of you that are listening in from the UK or Northwestern Europe, those slightly overcast grey days that we have all the time, they're actually really good lighting for taking pictures in. So I want you to get out there. If needed, rope a friend in. If that doesn't work, you can, I know this sounds mad, but you can actually get tripods very inexpensively, and they can be a really good way to suddenly get a whole new photo selection. I say, just remember to change your outfit between the pictures. So looking a little bit again, our step 4 is going to be about a bit about the background of those photos. So something that people often forget about is what's going on behind them in their image. Now, in my years working as a dating coach, I've seen a lot of photos, and I've actually probably been guilty of taking quite a lot of photos that are lift selfies, mirror selfies, gym selfies, or photos where, you know, you've got your bed in the background, an ironing board over there. And I know what you're thinking, wow, if someone's ironing, they are domestic. And maybe that is a good value to put across. But I think generally speaking, if the background is cluttered, it's going to detract from who you are and how well presented you are. And of course, you might get a few nosy people zooming in there to see, oh, you know, what's that on their bed? So because of that, if you have got some photos in there which either are a bit selfie, a bit lift selfie, or they've got a very cluttered background, I would advise, just like I've actually got this evening, going for a nice plain background, because it will really help you to stand out more. And whilst you might not have a television studio kicking around, what you can have is that are actually great things to use here are actually plain walls. A plain brick wall, or a plain brick wall that's painted white, or a plain brick wall which has ivy coming down it. These are actually amazing backdrops for photos. You could also consider taking photos in locations where you might spend time on a date. So that could be out walking in the park or a nice outdoors cafe, because our photos, remember, really are a way that we're communicating what it would be like to spend time with us and hang out if you're on a date together. So we want to make sure that the background of the photos is uncluttered, and we want to really go for either plain backgrounds or backgrounds which really showcase an aspect of our lifestyle. So before I leave photos alone, there's one area that I couldn't leave out, which is of course how you pose in those photos. Now I'm about to make myself feel very awkward as I try to demonstrate this to you tonight. So as I mentioned in the last section, being approachable is a very important value that you want to put across in your online dating profile. So approachability often comes through making eye contact with the camera and really smiling. So make sure, whilst you might have a few of those, I was going to say Heathcliff, people might not know who that is, photos of you like staring off into the distance, looking a bit more majestic, we actually also really want to have photos where you're making very good eye contact and you're smiling. That's going to really help to improve that approachability factor. The other thing I want you to be very conscious of is how tense your body language looks. We really want to avoid what I like to call like exam body language. If you just cast your minds back to when you were sitting your GCSEs or your O-levels, if you remember what people were like, they would be sort of like having their shoulders really, they'd be very symmetrical and looking very rigid, like something terrible was about to happen. So instead, before you take a photo, as unnatural as this may feel, I want you to take a really deep breath and then just relax your body language. And when we have relaxed body language, our body language tends to be asymmetrical. This means the two sides of us don't match. That could mean your head is tilted to one side, maybe one shoulder is more down, maybe you're putting more weight into one of your hips, maybe one foot is a bit forwards. All of these body language positions will suggest that we're just comfortable within ourselves. So be conscious of what your body language is communicating through your photos. So just to recap on a few points from this section. We want to really remember that photos tell a story about us and what it would be like spending time with us, so we want to be conscious of background. We also, if we're getting some new photos, natural daylight is great, and we also want to get photos that work together as a set. And I would say you need to have a minimum of 3 photos on your profile to really have enough of that trust factor. So before we move on to talking about, I think, possibly our most interesting topic tonight, which is what to send on that first message, I'm just going to answer a few more of your questions. So what to do if your date does most of the talking in a first date? Well, I think we've all been there, haven't we? And what I'd like to say is, first of all, just take a moment to recognise what emotional space that person is coming from if they're feeling the need to sort of talk continually. They're probably just feeling a little bit nervous. They want to make a good impression. They definitely don't want an awkward silence. So they're just filling that gap. So really, sometimes that might actually be improved if they feel a bit more secure on the date. So you could think, how could I make this person feel more secure? How can I make this person feel more safe? Maybe I could pay them a compliment. The other thing that you can do is, of course, and this can actually be quite flirtatious, and maybe that's a topic for another time, is you can actually interrupt a person in a way that isn't rude. Now, I know that sounds impossible to the English people out there, but you can say, hang on a minute, or whoa, I'm just going to jump in there, or your story is actually reminding me of something. So just by gesturing and by raising your voice and interrupting, you want to start to interject and also get your own story and points of view across. And whilst I would probably give this person, if they are a bit of a talker on the first date, another date or two to see if by becoming more relaxed that actually calms down. You also, of course, to be a good conversationalist, it's very important to remember to also be a good listener. So for all of us out there on our dates, make sure you're really listening carefully. Question 2. What do I do when the person I'm dating questions what we have in common? So this is something I'm going to ask you to make a bit of a judgment call about. Is this person feeling a little bit insecure in the relationship and looking for reassurance from you? Do they want to know that they're wanted? Or is it more the case that someone is saying, well, I'm not sure what we have in common, so you prove it to me? And I would say if it's option 2, where they're sort of showing that they're really uncertain about the relationship and they need you to convince them to stay in it, I'd be cautious there. Because as I said right at the start of this session, what all of us need is we really need partners who are willing and able to build that connection for us. So if someone's really on the fence from day one, I would say don't let it be an option. Instead, go for somebody and invest your time in people who really show up from day one as being on the same page and as committed to building an amazing relationship as you are. So question 3. Hi Hayley, what is your opinion on a woman asking a guy out first? Or shall I just sit around and wait for him to make the first move? So the fact that you said sit around, I think that implies that you're actually quite keen to make the first move, and maybe you're feeling a bit frustrated with just relying on inbound messages from guys that you're meeting. So I can see the logic sometimes in waiting for somebody else to approach you, because if they approach you, you know that they're definitely that willingness factor, you've ticked that off. However, I think there's a lot of reasons why someone may not approach you first. So it's going to be really valuable to learn also how you can make the first move. And brilliantly, we are going to be discussing that a bit in our next chapter, which is all about how to send a great first message.